Welcome to Felony Miami, where we have real conversations with real people about the criminal justice system in the United States of America.
Well, it's early in the morning, then when I ride, Lordy mama. Well, it's early in the morning, then when I ride. Well, it's early in the morning, baby, when I ride, baby, you have a life, on my right side.
Beating the system, earning your get out of being a scumbag card, getting off the hook, convincing the jury, making a deal, smashing the state, crushing the closing, destroying evidence. Wait, hold on. Maybe not destroying evidence because that's illegal. Suppressing evidence, maybe. Manipulating the system in the name of constitutionality. Whatever you gotta do to get out of jail, your criminal defense attorney is there to help you do it if you can afford it. That's the name of the game. But remember, a criminal defense attorney in trial isn't there to prove that you're innocent. It's their job to create a reasonable doubt. That's why they study hard, pay big bucks for law school, and charge you an arm and a leg and all of the money you have stashed in your mattress to help you in your quest to walk out a free person. Where there is injustice for one, there is injustice for all. Welcome to Felony Miami. Let's air it out. Hello and welcome back to Felony Miami. I'm your host, Joe Stone, and in the studio today we have three guests, three heavy-hitting criminal trial lawyers. To my left, Sabrina Puglisi. Sabrina is a Florida board-certified criminal trial attorney since 2008. And in Florida, there are only 370 board-certified criminal attorneys out of approximately 85,000 attorneys. That's just here in Florida. Or is that just in Miami? It seems like it's just in Miami.
I don't even know the answer to that. We're already starting with tough questions.
Yeah, right to it. She has the unique experience of having worked for both the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office and the Federal Defender's Office for the Southern District of Florida, where she has gained invaluable experience as a trial attorney, handling hundreds of different cases from pre-trial to trial. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And directly in front of me is Peter Schoenthal. Showing it all, Schoenthal.
The best way to remember it.
Peter is a skilled criminal defense attorney who has dedicated his life to his passion, trials. Peter believes that a criminal defense attorney must not only embrace but thrive while in trial in order to fully serve one's client. Trial is deemed as a dying art as numbers have dropped over the years due to plea bargains, I'm sure.
And mid-mans.
Yeah. And min-mans, yeah. However, this is an art form that he has dedicated his life to, and in order to best serve those who he represents, Peter describes himself as an old-school attorney with a new-aged approach. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Okay, Alfredo Izaguirre.
There you go.
I got the R roll in there. Alfredo is a Coral Gables criminal defense lawyer serving clients in criminal or civil matters statewide. Alfredo has tried some of the most complex cases in several districts of the county, and including those stemming from international allegations, and he has claimed victories in all of those arenas of law, and recently obtained an acquittal in federal court for a client who was charged with murder and kidnapping and was facing the death penalty. Congratulations.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right, so let's get right into this. Do you guys feel like you have to shower and bathe after your day's work as criminal defense attorneys, or is that like...
Well, I think it's always good to shower and bathe after a long day's work, but no, not not necessarily. A lot of people will be like, "Oh, how do you do what you do?" And yeah. I don't. A lot of it's representing the Constitution, and I think all of us have the same feeling that we have a passion for what we do, so we love what we do. So, at the end of the day, it's a lot of work, and it's long days, but I don't feel like icky or anything like that.
There's never been one day I've ever been ashamed of what I do. I think that we're fighting the good fight. we are on the side of people who, so many people ditch them during these hard times. Most of them just have made a mistake, and we're there to stand by them and help them.
I would say that all we do is make sure that the prosecution, whether it be the U.S. government or the state government, prove their case.
Right.
And if they can't prove it, then that's it. That's our job. Make them prove it. Make them prove beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody did what they're charged with.
Right. Because, one of the things that that I think people have, I think television and media has created this thing that people all of a sudden are guilty just because they've been charged. And it's a fact that in our criminal justice system, you are supposed to be innocent until proven guilty.
I think the misconception about criminal defense attorneys is that we can be like magicians or we're looking for these loopholes. When really I think a lot of our job is to make sure that all the actors in place within the government, the police, the FBI, state attorneys, federal AUSAs, our job is to make sure that they're doing their jobs and they're doing it correctly and not cutting any corners and messing with people's lives. It's our job to make sure that the system is working and making sure that no one is wronging people when they shouldn't be wronged.
But I think one of the sad facts, the truth is that, people believe you're guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
That's why
Yes.
there's so much fewer trials now, because jurors, they come in and, it's easy for a judge to say, do you believe, will you agree to follow the law? And for them to parrot, yes, I believe that. When in reality, we all know they don't believe that.
Yeah, do you ever think, I just was having a conversation with somebody the other day, do you ever think like looks have anything to do with this? Like if somebody's not, and I'm not saying black or white, I mean somebody that's maybe more attractive than somebody else?
That has a lot to do with it.
That does, right?
Sometimes, a female juror could say, oh, that individual looks like my son. He reminds me of my son.
Right.
Or, oh, that person looked like somebody who used to, I don't know, do something bad, or that guy looks like a bad guy.
Right. Or
He's
a male
got a-
juror could be like, I'll
Right.
get with her. She's kind of...
Right. Or,
It's human emotions to when you first see someone to make judgment. I mean, we all do it. To say that we don't would be a lie. And I think that happens in a courtroom. I think when people, look at your client, they're making preconceived, notions and judgments. And we do that with jurors. When we do our voir dire, I'm getting a little glimpse into their lives, and I'm making judgments right there. When the juror, then the panel walks in.
And a voir dire is when you question...
pick a jury.
You pick a jury,
Questions.
Yes, okay.
Ask them
That's-
questions.
And so when people walk in, I'm automatically, the first thing I'm doing is making judgments. And sometimes those judgments change, but I think that's just human nature.
Judging a book by its cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's obviously how we got that expression.
That's why so often, when I used to be a public defender, and depends on the clients you have, but you're always trying to make sure your client looks nice in a trial, right? I mean, you don't send them
Suit and tie,
you say
haircut,
wear
yeah.
your best church clothes.
Sure.
You're trying to give the impression.
Exactly.
It's kind of tricky, though. If it's a drug case, you don't want a $10,000 Armani suit. No. Keep the expensive watch at home.
Watching
Right.
rings at home, yeah.
Right.
So you mentioned the police and keeping everybody in line and the prosecutor. Have you guys experienced corrupt police, corrupt prosecutors that come in and just absolutely lie? And have you been able to catch them?
Yes.
Tell me a story about that.
Yes. I think in any field, you have good and bad. You have good apples, bad apples. So in the legal field, there's plenty of bad lawyers, but there's plenty of good ones. And I think same thing with police and same thing with prosecutors. I think the most dangerous prosecutors sometimes are the ones that their sole goal is to win. It's not about justice. It's about I want to win.
Well, you guys both worked, Sabrina and Peter, you both worked in the defender's office, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you did.
I did not know.
Okay. So, I mean, that must have given you a slightly different perspective on the whole relationship, right? I mean, has it?
Yes and no, but I think because you deal with prosecutors all the time.
Yeah, I mean,
too.
there's certain prosecutors have certain reputations. Oh, this person is unreasonable. You have to either threaten them to go to trial or actually go to trial and then potentially get a good deal when the jury's outside.
Right.
That
so,
kind of deal.
So let's
yeah.
say before you go to trial, because I know, Peter, you love going to trial. I'm assuming all three of
Yes.
you love going to trial. That's like
can't do this
That's
if you
where
don't love it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's reason. But how often are you caught up in between the actual going to trial and taking the plea? And do you leave that decision solely up to your client?
Well, I do mostly federal now, more so than state practice. And in federal court, it's very rare that cases are going to trial. And there are various reasons for that. But we have an obligation to always confer a plea to our clients. We have to. So at the end of the day, I always leave it in that person's hands. I say to them, it's not my life, it's your life. These are your choices, these are your options, these are the pros and cons, and you have to make that decision yourself.
Yeah.
But, as far as the prosecutors go, I think it depends on how personally they take it. If this is, because this is really a job, and we're all just doing our job, and
Just
we
people.
can agree to disagree. I'm on one side, you're on the other side. And I hope that I can go to work and at the end of the day go home knowing this is a job for me. I'm passionate about it, but it's still a job. And the problem you run into is when you see those police officers or those prosecutors that take it personally. It's not just a job for them. They either have some vendetta against that particular client or that issue.
Right.
That's where you run into problems.
Yeah.
And I think that's why mitigation is also so important, because the purpose, at least for me, with mitigation is
Now, when you say mitigation, what do you mean?
I was going to basically, how do I take my client from being a number or a defendant and make that a human being to the prosecutor, and showing that this is a real person who's, there's pitfalls in their lives, things have happened to them, things in the system have happened to them, and it kind of gives the prosecutor a better grasp of who that
Try
person
to humanize
is. And humanize them,
Yeah.
yes, humanize.
Yeah. Interesting. So you do use that as a technique to try to get through to the prosecutor, to create, hey, this is a guy, he had a mom, he had a dad, he had a grandma, he had a grandpa.
In plea negotiations always, because, a lot of times in plea negotiations, you're kind of coming with your hat in your hand and you're trying to, accomplish a certain goal. But I think while doing that, and I think we'd all agree, it's important that when you get a case, you always think from the back to the front. You're preparing it for trial, and you're preparing it the best you can while also doing those little things, because you have to be ready for everything. And the better you prepare for trial, the better you find defenses, the better you find ways through the law to better your case. That also strengthens your negotiation along with your mitigation,
Right.
and that's why it's important.
So, Alfredo, when you got this guy off for murder and kidnapping,
Yeah.
He was facing the death penalty. Just real quick around the table, who here is in favor of capital punishment? Sabrina? No? Blank faces.
But I'll tell you, my reason is just because I think the death penalty, if you kill somebody, it's a much quicker.
Easy way out.
It's an easy way out. I think that if you are deserving, you have committed that ultimate crime that is so heinous, you deserve to sit every day in prison for the rest of your life, no TV. Like, it should be a horrible life. It shouldn't be as quick as, now you're dead and done.
Not only that, we just get it wrong too many times for it to be. It's I understand why certain people would like it in theory, but there's just been too many instances where we've gotten it wrong, and it's too late to overturn that wrong.
That's very true.
So, and you obviously don't believe in capital punishment.
I think that it's excessive. In some cases, it is appropriate, but obviously not in all. So, kind of gray area, I guess.
So, how did you approach getting this person that was convicted of murder and kidnapping acquitted?
Well, the initial issue of potentially why the death penalty was waived is the individual that he was accused of killing was also a drug dealer they had abducted. So this, I guess, victim had ripped off a lot of drugs.
So the victim was a bad guy.
Yes, exactly.
So that made it like,
yeah. So the issue of
Kinda-
the issue of death or life never went to the jury. It was waived before the actual trial started.
And that's because you brought that
We
to them?
brought that, that this was not a law-abiding, altar boy, squeaky clean individual.
Reverse
He was-
mitigation.
Right. He was somebody who ripped off drug dealers.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then the jury obviously then found him not guilty of the murders.
And how long did that trial take you to?
That trial took about I want to say a week and a half, 6-7
the
days.
actual trial, but how
Yes.
long did the whole thing
The
take?
case
you?
was about I want to say 10 months,
10 months.
a year. Yeah.
What's your guys' average time to prepare for a trial?
They're all different. You guys are more.
I mean,
in-
for like a heavy crime, murder or something.
It depends if it's
Yeah.
state court or federal
Yeah.
court. So in state court, trials take a long time to prepare. You could be 2, 3, 4, 5 years even before on a death penalty case. It could be at least 5 years before you're going to get to court. But in federal court, things move much, much faster. So it's unheard of to do a death penalty case, within 10 months. I mean, that's unheard of.
My case was continued twice.
Yeah.
I have state cases of murders that I've been working on for about 3 years, and the federal case was continued twice. My state cases have been continued about, we're going on continuance number 25.
Wow.
So,
And why do these things get continued? Explain what that is when you're in a trial.
In state court, you have the right to take depositions.
Okay.
So you have in a murder, there's a lot of police officers, a lot of witness, victims, CSI. So you have to take depositions, especially in a murder case that it's going to go to trial, and the stakes are high. And if you don't depose one of these individuals and the defendant ends up getting convicted, and there's issues about whether you did or did not do a good job because you did not take every deposition on the case, So you do have to take every single deposition and interview every witness.
Right.
So that does take a lot of time.
And that's not always easy. You got to serve subpoenas. You got to find out where people are. Oftentimes, people will reschedule. They won't come in for depositions, and those depositions are extremely important to not unraveling, but learning about your case. Depositions are oftentimes the best place to learn about your case, which is why federal is a whole different animal.
But honestly, that's what makes his win even more
Yes.
impressive, is because he wasn't
Thanks.
entitled to depositions, reports, all
But you're
those
not
things.
entitled to that at the federal level?
In federal, you know what the police officer is going to say when he gets up there. Sometimes you have a brief report, but you don't ever have the right to confront the witness before they testify.
They call it trial by ambush.
Yeah,
That's the federal level.
right. The conviction rate's I think like 90-95%.
It's 90,
Yeah, it's insane.
Do you guys ever ask your clients if they did it?
I don't really care if they did it or not. I don't really ask that because it doesn't matter to me whether they did it or not. That's not what my job is. My job is to fight for that person the best way that I can.
I don't ask that
I
either.
don't, I
You
don't,
don't ask it?
No.
I don't ask it specifically, but I do try to encourage my clients to tell me as much as possible, and that when they speak to me, it's a safe space.
Right.
We have confidentiality, because the more I can learn from my client, the better it helps me prepare for the case. I know it's
How does
coming.
that? But how do you square that if oh lovely, sorry, we have some work being done in the building today. No worries, our trusty engineer will get that out, I'm sure, in post. But so how do you square that though if you're looking down the barrel of somebody that you know is being honest with you and said, yeah, you know what, I did that. That's right. I mean. How do you move forward with that, with defending them if they get super honest with you and let you know that they did it?
You represent the Constitution. When we take our oath, it's to represent our clients to our best ability, to give them the best defense possible. And remember, our job is still to make sure that the state or the federal government and all other actors are doing their jobs and that they're not doing anything wrong. I think the documentary Making a Murderer is kind of one of the best examples of that. Who knows what really happened, but those type of acts, no matter whether you're innocent or guilty, cannot be done to ensure proper justice is being carried out.
And you can still go to trial with somebody who tells you that they've done it. Now, there's questions about whether you can put that person on the stand or not
That's
to
an issue
testify. Because if you honestly believe that that person is going to lie, you cannot put them on, or they have to testify in a narrative.
Would you suffer some consequence if you knew?
Potentially.
Really? What kind of consequence
you'd
would you
be
suffer?
helping them commit perjury and potentially the Florida bar.
It's unethical.
Yeah.
Okay.
So sometimes if you ask, hypothetically, if you ask, they say yes. Okay, now they have admitted to you that they said yes, that they did it.
Yeah.
In the middle of the trial, now he said he never wanted to testify. Now in trial, he says, I want to testify and say that I didn't do it. Right?
Dilemma.
Now you're in a pickle.
Yeah.
Well, if I have this guy testify, he told me he didn't do it. He told me he did it. Now he's going to go up there and say he didn't do it. Now I'm going to help him commit perjury. So now you have an ethical issue with the
So
Florida
what
bar.
do you do if that happens?
I personally never ask them if they did it or not.
But what if that happens? What do you do? Do you say, hey, wait, hold time? What's the procedure? What do you do?
Technically, I think you just ask him, well, what do you want to say about what happened?
Yeah.
And you just let him go and say, him or her, say whatever it was that they want to say and get off their chest.
I mean-
without you.
But no, let's
I've
say
had like
that's
100
specific.
trials,
Yeah.
and I've never had that situation.
You've never had that happen.
No, so I mean, I think that's like maybe the law school exam
Yeah.
question for ethics,
Oh, yeah.
what you're
Okay.
asking. It's just not what would happen in everyday life.
It's just okay. So this is
The tough questions are starting.
It's a scenario.
Yeah,
the tough
right.
questions are coming.
What would you say the most difficult part of the criminal defense trial? What part of preparing or actually presenting? What's the most difficult part for you guys?
I think voir dire, because I think you can win or lose a case
Yeah.
with your jury. And it's very, very difficult. You are trying to pick 6 or 12 people, depending on if you're in state or federal court. You're trying to pick these people who you don't know.
Right.
You've never met them before. You've got a piece of paper that they've written some thoughts about, answered some questions.
Okay.
And in federal court, some of these judges don't even allow you to ask any questions of these people. So how are you supposed to know whether someone is going to be fair and judge your client, appropriately?
So what kind of questions do you ask a potential juror?
What do you
I mean,
What do you think of somebody who's behind a police car?
Mm-hmm.
I think they did something.
I mean, I ask you have
Yeah.
anything like that, or I ask them where they get their news from. I'll pose it.
Okay.
Do you watch local news? Do you CNN? I try not to.
You're
show
looking to
them
get
what-
rid of those Fox viewers.
Yes,
I know.
exactly.
but I'm trying
Come on,
to,
man.
But I'm trying to phrase it in a way where they don't kind of know where I'm going. I always make the joke that my mother's addicted to Facebook, so she gets her news from Facebook.
Okay.
I watch local news. I have friends that watch CNN. Where do you get your news from? Because when we go,
You want those people that are saying NPR.
yeah, well, we're the last.
Hell yeah.
In voir dire, we're the last ones to go. So they've heard a lot of these questions. They're kind of either zoning you out or overly tuned in.
Oh, the defense is the last one to ask?
Yes.
Okay. So the prosecution asks, does the judge
The
ask?
judge first
Judge
asks.
Judge asks
first.
first. Okay.
Judge.
And what kind of questions is he asking usually?
Usually they have
Standard,
standard questions
They do.
that they have, like, they'll have the people answer them in a little sheet of paper
Okay.
beforehand.
Like, have you ever been arrested?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Have you been on a trial before? Was
Okay.
it a criminal or a civil trial?
Okay.
Don't tell us the verdict. Just did you guys reach a verdict? Were you the foreperson?
Okay.
Has anyone been a victim of a crime? Have you been a victim of a crime?
Right. Okay. And then prosecution goes,
And then the defense after.
and then you guys
But
are the last.
a lot of times the questions that the judge asks are questions
Yes.
where they want the response of, yes, I can be fair and impartial. Instead of saying, hey, what do you think about this case? They'll ask you, hey, sir, you can be fair and impartial in this trial, correct? The person's going
Right.
to say yes.
They'll
Okay.
actually specifically. Do you think you could be fair and impartial in this?
As they sit
they'll-
up
they'll-
here looking
yeah.
down, can you
Yeah,
be
yeah,
fair
sir.
and impartial?
Yeah.
They'll
Do you
kinda lead you.
understand a person
Yeah.
has a constitutional right to not testify, and you cannot hold it against them if he chooses not to testify? Do you understand that? And will you agree with that? What are they going to say? No, but everybody wants to hear from the defendant. Have you ever met anybody who doesn't want to hear from somebody?
Yeah. I mean, I've sat on a jury. I was actually
Criminal
the
or
foreman in a federal criminal case.
Oh,
Okay.
well,
Oh,
look
wow.
at you.
Yeah, no, it was super cool. And I was the foreman. I was very...
You're
like, I got this.
You can do this with us.
Yeah.
We'll start asking you
It was
questions.
honestly, and I would encourage anybody that can hear me talking on this show, if you get the opportunity to go sit in on a jury, do it. It's probably one of the most interesting and inspiring things as a citizen, because you feel super connected to your community and that you're serving and doing something really positive for your community.
Not only that, I have friends and family that ask me all the time, how do I get off jury duty? And I refuse to tell them. Our government asks we don't have a draft anymore. You pay your tax. But this is like the one thing that we still ask for people. And
Right.
if you were in that situation, you would hope that like-minded people or real people
Right.
would not be looking for excuses to go back to work. And so it's very important to serve on juries and be a part of that process. And so I refuse to help people when they ask me that question.
No, yeah, I always tell people, why would you want to get off? I said, it's the coolest, it's such a cool process. It's so interesting, and you actually see how the system works. And yes, I remember the judge looking down at me, and he was going down the line. Have you ever been arrested? Have you ever been arrested? And, he asked me, and I was like, I wonder if this guy's going to do a background check. Well, yeah, I kind of hesitated. I was like, well, yeah. He was like, I have to ask. And I was like, disorderly conduct, college. He's like, next guy.
Been there, done that.
He was like, shit.
Is that it?
Yeah.
We're making him the foreperson.
Yeah, great.
He gets it.
So voir dire is your most difficult. What's your most difficult part of the trial? Preparing or being involved in the criminal trial?
Not being a slave to my notes, listening. We go in there and we prepare so much, and oftentimes we want to rely too much on our preparation. If I'm doing a cross-examination, I've got not a script, but I've got my outline. And I have this idea of where I know where it wants to go. Right. But oftentimes someone gives you an answer and it throws you off. And you got to be able to listen, think on your feet, and trust your preparation and the evidence where you can go exploit that or examine that. And too many times, I think a lot of lawyers, they get thrown off by that because they're stuck to their script. So I think listening in trial and not being stuck to my notes and my script is one of the pitfalls that I try to avoid.
Very cool.
I would agree. Cross-examination is probably the hardest thing. I've been in trial, and I've had notes I prepared, for 2 days for this witness. And I just throw them away.
Cross-examination means that you go second.
The
questioning somebody?
prosecutor asks the witness questions, open-ended questions, and then we ask leading questions, obviously trying to get what we want.
So break that down for me real quick. So the prosecutor, you said, asks open-ended questions.
Right.
Who,
Kinda
what,
like,
when, where, why.
What
Who,
happened?
what, when,
Tell me
where,
what
why.
happened without trying to infer an answer.
Okay.
And then we should ask most of the questions are leading questions, meaning, hey, you did this, correct? Kind of forcing the witness to say what it is we at least try to get them to say.
So a lead.
Joe, you're
Right.
wearing a T-shirt. It's blue. It has a V-neck. You're wearing, leading them into
Right,
it. You're feeding them the answer
Okay.
to yes and a no.
Is that correct? Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, okay.
But I mean, you could only lead so much when the witness says, no, you're wrong, or they'll stop you. Or if you have a witness who's a female who's crying on the stand, okay, your whole approach of getting aggressive on a witness is going to go out the door because you can't start asking hard questions to a female who's crying on the stand. You can if you want to, but then the jury's going to take it, hold
they're
it
gonna
against
think
you.
you're a
and think
dick,
you're
and
a
they're
jerk.
going to say,
Exactly.
hey, come on, take it easy on the girl.
Yeah, they may be quiet, but then at the end of the day, you're going to find out what they thought when they found your client guilty.
I remember getting a not guilty
yeah.
once in state court where it was, I was cross-examining a girl, and she started getting so nasty with me. And so I just backed off. I was like sweet as I could be and asking questions. And, later jurors, it was a not guilty, jurors came later and were like, she was so mean to you. We didn't like her. And it's because you have to listen, you have to pay attention, you have to be in the moment. As Peter said, you can't be so focused on notes and preparation that you're not seeing what's right in front of you, opportunities right in front of you.
Absolutely.
It's like sports. You watch film, you prepare for the game, but sometimes things just happen, and sometimes you get punched in the mouth, and it's how you respond and how you go once you get that curveball. And I think that's what differentiates the good from the great when it comes to trial lawyers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting. One of our producers wants to know if you guys can tell us how discovery impacts the pretrial process in Florida as compared to other states, if you know. Because I know Florida has some unique laws also that they're different from some.
Well, depositions. We
Yeah,
talked about.
that's
I think
the
we're
main
one
difference.
of.
and that's only in state court.
Yes.
Right.
You can't do that in federal.
It's one
No.
of the few states that
Yeah.
still
We're
allow
We're one of three.
depositions.
Oh, really?
We're one of 3 states, I believe. And
Okay.
we have a fact checker. We can look that
Yeah.
up.
Can
I
you
believe-
tell us the other 2 states, fellas?
I believe we're one of only 3 states that even allows depositions on criminal cases. And that's just so important. And that changed the game because you have an opportunity to interview your witness beforehand so you know what's coming. If they change that story, you can impeach them. But then there's also a negative to it. If you do your deposition as if you're going to cross-examine them. Now that witness is getting used to your cadence, they're getting used to the way you ask questions, and they're kind of getting a feel for you. So it can work both ways, but it's more positive.
You can
than
get
negative.
witnesses out of there too. You
Yeah.
know. You ask a witness, who else was there? They may not be listed as a witness by the state attorney.
Right.
But he's going to give you a list of everybody else he thinks is there. So,
Oh,
then
so
you
you
can
can-
go get that
You
person.
can continue to build
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah.
And just like in the movie My Cousin Vinny,
Best movie ever.
do you have to share that same information with the prosecution?
I mean, you have to give them a notice that you're going to potentially
Yeah.
set a depo, but not if you're going to speak to a witness.
You do.
What are the
So I'm
good-
trying to think. I think that movie was in Alabama. I wonder if
Yeah.
they actually are the other state
Roll
that has
Tide.
the.
or War Damn Eagle,
Was it-
or
was
War Eagle. But I think also one of the good things about depositions is it allows us to, especially with victim cases, we get to do the deposition of the victim, and sometimes we get to ask them how they feel about the case, what they want. Because sometimes we'll talk to the prosecutor and they'll be like, "This person is on board; they want prison time." Then I'll get that person in front of me with the prosecutor there, and they're like, "I just wanted a little scare, I wanted a little probation," and now I've got that on the record, and that kind of changes things sometimes. So
Yeah.
that also works.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Victims have to approve, most of the time, approve what is going to be offered to the defendant in state court.
The problem I see just is it's very unfair because, you know, we have people's lives in our hands.
Yeah.
And, you know, that we shouldn't be able to be as prepared as possible is just unfair. In civil cases, there is an exchange of discovery. Everything is exchanged. Depositions are taken. Yet, you know, they want to get rid of depositions in state court in Florida.
Who's they?
Legislature a lot.
The legislature. They don't want it. All the people who don't want it. Prosecutors, police officers.
Is that a Republican-led agenda? Is that a Democratic-led agenda? Is that I guess if it's the current Florida legislature, it's mostly Republican.
Right.
But
Right.
but criminal justice is interesting because you'll even get a lot of liberal people that are like, why should we help out the criminals?
Right.
It
but
goes
what
back
if
to
they
the
actually
innocent
didn't do it?
But it goes back to we have innocent until proven guilty. But it goes back to when you're in that chair, especially at trial, you must have done something. You're
Yeah.
here.
Right.
Even
Yeah,
if
that's
you're
the-
liberal,
exactly. Right.
you know, people
Yeah.
don't like criminals. I mean, or people accused of
It's why I don't
crime.
like the fact that we call it criminal law or
Right.
you're in criminal court.
Interesting.
It automatically means you're a criminal.
People
I hate
think,
that.
hey, if there's smoke, there's fire. That's what
Yeah.
Oh,
people,
for
the
sure.
most part,
I
you
mean,
know.
I'm super liberal. I mean, I'm conservative on some things, but in general, I was brought up liberal. And I still do that.
Yeah.
But I know better. I know better to say, wait, it's actually innocent until proven guilty. But still, my mind wanders and goes, come on, what's the guy even doing?
Right.
Getting arrested. But it
but-
can happen. We've seen mistakes made.
Right. But to not let us even be as prepared as we possibly can be.
Right.
It's just not right. You know, what's the point of that is not having a level playing field. That's all anybody can ever ask for in life. Just make it fair.
Especially when
yeah.
lives are on the line.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when did this change? Did we ever have depositions allowed for federal cases, and did that get changed? Or it seems
don't
like
know.
yeah,
I
it
don't-
seems like
you know, I don't know the
yeah.
answer to
okay.
that. I mean,
So as long as you all have been practicing,
Yeah, there's been never been
many,
yeah.
many
Yeah,
years
it's been
in
that
federal
way.
court, depositions have not been allowed, if ever. So for criminal cases,
Right. For civil
Yeah.
cases, they allow you.
different. Yeah,
Yeah,
civil stuff is different.
Yeah.
Which you would think it'd be the other way around. but-
Right.
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall when I was on that. It was a fraud case, but I guess it was just evidence being introduced.
Yeah. Well, when you're even in where there's depositions, you're not going to necessarily hear about the depositions when you're on the jury unless someone's being impeached, which means they give a different story at one time and now they're giving a different story on the stand. So I can point that out. But the actual
Oh, and you'll go back and read from the
right, exactly.
from the
You
deposition.
remember line
you,
8
you remember
transcripts.
when you came in 3 weeks ago and there was a court reporter typing away and you swore to tell the truth, the whole truth,
Right.
and you said A, and now that same court reporter's here and you're telling me B. You know, now we can call them out. But other than that, I mean, depositions really aren't being
Right,
brought
they're
in.
not in
In
evidence.
civil court, sometimes they don't even call witnesses. They just read the depots. That's the witness testifying is the depot read. So depots are a little different.
Okay.
And one of the best ways to show that is criminal depositions are so unique that there isn't even rules for it. We rely on the civil rules of procedure when it comes to depositions. There isn't like a criminal rule book on depositions in Florida. We
no.
rely on the civil rules.
Just the standard civil rules. Interesting. Okay, so now tell me, besides winning, What's your favorite part of dealing with a criminal trial? Besides winning, we all know.
I was like,
that the
besides
winning.
winning?
Come on, we all know the winning is. I got to take that out.
Does walking someone out of court after a win count? Or is that winning?
No, that's winning. Everything up until that verdict is read and they read it in your favor. What's your favorite part of digging into these criminal trials and trying to get that not guilty verdict?
When I know I picked a good jury. When I know that my voir dire went the way I want it to and I've got a panel that gives me a shot. When I know that I had a good voir dire or I crushed a closing. Those are the two things.
Yeah.
Oh, no, when you say when you crushed a closing, because that means like a closing argument?
Yeah, the closing argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you walk away and you just got that big shit-eating grin on your face. You're like, I killed that.
Well, I only have the shit-eating grin while I'm walking back. And as soon as I turn back around to the jury, it's back. It's one of those.
I
Yeah.
got you. How about
You know,
you?
besides obviously getting a not guilty, the second favorite thing I like is being able to bond the client out in federal court, at least. You know,
Bond?
yeah, in state court it's kind of automatic, but in federal court a lot of times you have to have a hearing and fight for that hearing in order to bond the client out.
Well, don't you always have to have a bond hearing?
Yes, but in state court it's more of this is a standard bond and move on.
Yeah, because they have an actual schedule in state court for
in
bond.
federal court, they actually
Yeah.
really look at each defendant closely.
Right. You know, we're one of the only two countries in the world with a money bond system, with a money bail system.
a joke.
It's us and the Philippines.
It's a joke.
FYI. Just if you would.
But you know, most of these individuals got arrested that early day or the night before.
Okay.
And got dragged out of their house. Most of the time, their wives, their kids saw that gunpoint. Everybody's at gunpoint, handcuffed.
Is it usually like FBI or Homeland Security?
Yeah,
or Secret
FBI,
Service?
DEA.
Really?
Anybody.
And that's federal. The federal bond.
Yes, yeah. And, you know, so next day, bond hearing, everybody's crying, nobody slept.
Right.
You know, what's going on? Is my husband or my brother or my son going to get
And-
out?
and
then
tell-
you get
tell
them
me how
out.
that
They're even
process-
alive. I mean,
Yeah.
you're kicking
Tell me
in
how
doors
that
with
process
guns.
goes. How does that work? Do they walk them into the room? Is it on a video camera? Tell me how that
No,
whole thing goes.
It's in court. They actually bring them to the hearing. In
The
state
United
court,
States
yeah.
Marshals, they're the ones that
The U.S. Marshals.
the U.S. Marshals.
Yeah.
They bring them in, they sit them down. But in federal court, any transport of prisoners is done by the U.S. Marshal Service.
Really? Mm-hmm. Interesting. So they'll walk them in, and then what happens?
They bring them next to you. You have your hearing. You cross-examine.
Yeah.
A lot of times, cross-examine the agent who's handling the case
Okay.
to see what evidence they have against your client. And then you make some arguments regarding ties to the community. You know, does this guy have a family? Is he going to flee? Does he have money somewhere else? Does he own property somewhere else? And then the judge makes a judgment call,
And how-
specifically as to each defendant.
And this is your favorite part when you get
Winning
a
it,
yes.
winning it, yes, not
You-
losing it,
you
winning
took
it.
winning. You can't use a winning thing.
You took the good one away.
The second one is, you know,
Come on.
winning the bond hearing.
Well, obviously. Okay. He went to a winning. Tell me, what's your favorite part?
I would say a good cross-examination, knowing that you got good points off of this person, that you just, as he said, crush the closing argument, crush
You made
the
them
witness,
you made them look bad.
and you look at the jury and they're like,
yeah,
And you get that head
that
nod.
guy's a liar.
yeah.
There's no better feeling when you get that jury head nod with you.
Yeah,
Like, I know what you're
and
doing.
You're like,
yeah.
yeah.
It's classic. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so have any of you experienced firsthand corruption, like during a case? Have you actually been able to say this is corrupt? Been able to spot it and identify it and point it out and have some sort of resolution? Has that ever happened to any of you? Have you ever
In the
seen
middle
that?
of trial or in general?
Just in general in a case?
I can say I have.
Tell us.
Well, I'll say that in a case that I had, I do believe that the prosecutor did some unethical things. There was evidence that was buried that was...
What kind of a case was it?
It was, if I say it, everyone's going to know. It was my baseball case. I represented a baseball trainer, and it was
What was the
a
baseball
large,
trainer charged with?
with alien smuggling. It was a large case here in the Southern District of Florida. We took it to trial, and he was unfortunately found guilty. I believe 100% that he's innocent. And I do believe that some things were done.
How much time did he get sentenced to?
The judge was good to us in that she sentenced him to 63 months. It's 5 years, 3 months. The government wanted at first 20 years they were asking for. We made some legal arguments, and the minimum mandatory was 5 years. But it's impossible to prove that. As much as I might think unethical things happened, I couldn't prove that. I don't know it to be true 100%. It's what my belief is based on some circumstances. But at the end of the day, proving corruption, it's not like the movies where the TV shows where, I'm right now watching Suits. I don't know if you know that show.
I know the
I'm
show.
watching it on Amazon, and I love it. It's so great, but it's just not realistic. You're not finding that the person, acted unethically and the case is getting dismissed. It's just impossible.
No Perry Mason moment.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's why we all paused, because we all have situations where we're like, we think we're like 98% sure, but it's just too hard to prove it, which is why body cams are great. But like when I was started at the public defender's office, and they have this unit called early representation. When you first get to felony, you're representing people from the time they're arrested until the cases are actually filed. So you're kind of helping them there. And I remember reading an arrest form. Someone was arrested for crack cocaine possession, and the arrest form literally said, I was out in a high crime area, and we all know that means a low income area. And this gentleman approached me and says, "Officer, I have crack on me." And he arrested her. We all know that's not how it went
Everybody
down.
does that.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
But there's
I'd
no-
like to have a heart attack.
And that case was thrown out because it was so egregious, but it was never proved that it was corruption or that this officer
lying. It was
lied.
lying.
But we all have instances like that, which I think why we pause. We just can't always prove it as
Right.
much as we'd like to.
Almost never can you prove it,
Yeah.
and that's why it's hard to even talk about it, because it's like that thing nobody wants to talk about. They don't want to admit that this stuff goes on, but it does.
But it does. And how can it be changed? How could
Culture.
so culture from the state attorney's office?
Everywhere. Culture in the state attorney's office, culture within police and FBI. I mean, and we had spoken about this before. I think a lot of the times, especially in police, it should be 50-50 combat training and then the other 50 de-escalation or conflict resolution. But unfortunately, it's probably 95-5. And so you get a lot of, I hate to say this, warriors who are all about just cleaning up the streets, and they just overlook certain things. And when your goal is to hit numbers and your goal is to, just clean the streets up under your definition, you're going to do whatever it takes. And I think sometimes it goes back to also with prosecutors, the ones that want to win rather than seek justice. And I think it's a culture. It's a culture.
And our judges have an obligation.
Yeah.
I mean, they really, I think it's such an important thing to either be elected or appointed to be a judge.
Well, I would agree that the judges are important. I think it's the culture and how we deal with. But do you think that mandatory minimums have created? Do you think they've created some kind of an imbalance on people's ability to judge more humanely? I mean, how have you seen the mandatory minimums affect the system?
Well, defendants are getting a lot more time because of it. That's one thing. Judges sometimes are bound by it. You're in the hands of the prosecution, whether they want to waive it or you're stuck going to trial.
So you might have a client who's innocent, and their minimum mandatory is 20 years, and the offer from the state of the government is 3 years, and they're making real decisions on what to do. And so your trials are down because of that, because you're just facing so much time. And sometimes it's not worth rolling the dice, because we can never go in there and guarantee our clients, we're going to win this trial. This is a winner. The jury's going to, we can't make that guarantee, no matter how much they ask. And so I think the shift in the way you approach your life changes in that sense. If that I don't know if that came
that
across.
makes sense. Let me ask you a question about trial tax. A trial tax. Now, this is an expression that we've heard on a couple of shows.
Shout out Brown Hosting.
My man. before the show, we were talking about the client that got off for murder and kidnapping that was facing the death penalty.
Yeah.
But you made a comment. I heard you guys talking to say, "Oh, yeah, trial tax."
Yeah, I mean,
Tell us what it is, and then tell us your experience with it.
this individual was convicted of marijuana, a couple of plants. I think it was under 50 or under 100. I can't remember right
Okay.
now. The amount of time he would have got for that charge, pleading guilty, would have been about 24 to 36 months, 2 to 3 years. And instead, he was sentenced to 20 years. Because although the jury found him innocent of the murder and the kidnapping, I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine the judge thought he was guilty. So he said, you know what, let me give this guy the maximum amount of legal time that I can give him. And that's what he did. Why? Because he went to trial.
So this
Yeah.
is something that I think the public does not realize
Yeah.
is that in federal court, they have what's called relevant conduct. And what it means is you could be held responsible for acquitted conduct. So you go to trial, you're found guilty of just one thing and not guilty of the rest of the charges against you. But then the judge believes by a preponderance of the evidence, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, but by a preponderance of the evidence, a much lower standard, the judge believes that you did commit those other things. They can apply that to your guideline calculations, and you could be held responsible as if you had committed those things. And so what we're really saying to jurors is, we don't care about your decision. You know, I know you sat here and you listened and you decided this person should be found not guilty of that. You know what? We're going to instead sentence them as if they were found guilty of that.
Right.
Would the O.J. Simpson case be an example of that?
I don't know.
think that-
The robbery one?
Yeah, the robbery
I don't
one,
know.
where basically, his
got-
priors that came into
Federal
effect.
court, a lot of times, it has to be all or
Now
nothing.
with the priors, but because I don't know enough, was that a state case or
No,
a federal?
federal.
It was
I
a
believe-
federal
I
case.
believe it was a federal
So
one.
potentially that
Was it?
could have, but
I actually don't know.
I
if it
don't
was
know.
federal. I think that's a good point. I don't
I think
know
he
if
was
it
in Vegas.
Yeah, I think it was state. Because state, your
case, yeah.
priors will come in.
right.
Yes. Okay.
But
State
here
your
it's
priors come in.
Yeah.
Do they not come in at federal?
They do.
Okay,
But
yeah,
we're
I was
talking
gonna-
about
yeah.
just specifically
specific case.
stuff you
Okay.
were found not guilty
Yeah.
of by a jury. Do you think jurors would be pissed off that they sat there for however many days,
A week.
tried to make a good decision? I mean, you were in that
Yeah,
position.
I was there for a week.
How would you feel if after that you found somebody not guilty and then you found out that he was sentenced, he or she was sentenced, as if it didn't matter that you just sat there all those days?
Yeah. So that happens, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, and people don't realize this.
And does that fall under the expression trial tax?
Yes.
Yeah, and in the other episode, Brad talked a lot about it. The way the judge will make an offer. Because a lot of the times you'll go to the judge, especially in state court, and you'll say, the state's offering this. Would you be willing to get involved? And they'll make an offer. And let's say they offer 5 years, and you go to trial and you lose. The judge will maybe give you 10 years for going to trial and quote unquote wasting their time,
Not taking their offer.
and not taking their offer. And the way they get around that, like Brad said, was I learned new facts in the trial that have now changed my mind. When the judge hasn't. The judge has the file, and they know everything. You've been litigating a lot of these motions from the onset. The judge knows this case very well. But now all of a sudden, you've spent a week of my time. I've had to stay later than I've wanted to. That offer, that was 5. No, now you get 10. And that's very prevalent. And oftentimes we have to explain that to our clients, especially if we know a judge does that. And now that goes into it becomes a factor as to whether or not you actually go to trial.
Yeah.
By the way, your little sidebar on OJ was a state case.
That's why. There we go.
Thank our researchers for that.
Thank you, fact check.
Oh yeah. We're still waiting on the information about the other states that that have the
Depositions.
Depositions.
Yes. So as soon as our fact checkers get busy with that, thank you.
You know, I wanted to just, if I could, point something out with, you had asked before about the minimum mandatories and how
Yes.
that affects, our government now, our attorney general, it has, the policy is to be especially tough on crime now. So everything that maybe minimum mandatories that maybe the prosecutors used to waive and decide to charge differently, they have now been told through memos into all the U.S. attorney's offices, look, we want you to charge the most severe crime that you can. We do not want you to waive minimum mandatories. We want you to be tough. And so, it always changes in the political climate that you have, but definitely it is affected. What happens to the clients and their sentences is affected by politics.
And by the way, I don't believe there's ever been a correlation between being extremely hard on crime and deterrent of crime, although that's the pitch that we all hear.
Yeah, no, I mean it's the same. It's the same studies with capital punishment. It's been studied over and over, and there's, empirical evidence that shows it does not deter people from doing the heinous crime. It just doesn't. So, why do we do it? Again, is it better to have somebody, if they committed a horrible crime and they were guilty, sit in prison? And then again, what if it was a mistake? And like you said, now that we have DNA testing, a lot of people have been
exonerated by it.
Yeah.
Being tough on crime sells, right? When you're running for office, it
Yes.
sells.
Yes.
Or what if somebody was a drug user and not really a drug dealer, but the quantity they had,
Possessed it,
goes towards a minimum mandatory? Well, now they're not taking that into consideration. They're just going to.
So how do we change that?
Another pause.
How do we change that? You guys are going into court on the criminal level. How do we affect a change to this culture, to this these way these state attorneys are pushing these mandatory minimums, the way the state attorneys are pushing people to take pleas? How do we change it? Are you guys the ones to change it?
Well, I think that there isn't necessarily like a on-point answer, but I think the best way to look at it is we have to stop treating cases like black and white. Every incident, there's always gray. So when we have these minimum mandatories or these set guidelines, you're treating crimes and acts in black and white manner, and you're negating the gray. And we have judges that are appointed, or elected, and we're supposed to have trust in these judges and state attorneys. We should allow more. We should allow them. Because I'd say more leadway, but then you have the bad actors who then would abuse that. So it's tough. But I think having these set, if you do this, you get this,
Right.
I think makes it very difficult to humanize and to show the gray, because it's never black and white.
Yeah.
It's never black and
is.
white. Nothing's black and white.
With min-mans, you can't take the gray into consideration.
Yeah, and I think the min-mans, I guess, were put into place when the United States was experiencing a large uptick in violence and violent crimes, and legislators were like, oh, what are we going to do about all this? And now we see that violent crime is down, and I guess, do you guys see arrests and criminal convictions being reduced, or are they the same, or are they up?
I think arrests are like down, right?
I mean,
I think
DUIs are
arrests
down.
are
Arrests are down.
Thank you, Uber.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Uber.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it
arrests are
depends. But, your answer to before, people are doing something about it. Organizations are. So, like NACDL, the
Yeah.
National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, FACDL, the Florida Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, Carlos Martinez with the Public Defender's Office. He's always going to Tallahassee. These people are going and they're speaking to the to everybody there, trying to promote and explain our issues. So there are people trying to make change.
Yeah.
Also, understanding mental health. That's a big aspect.
That's a whole show in itself.
Yeah.
Because for some reason in this country, it appears, I'm going to say somewhere in the 60s or 70s, that we decided to make our police forces our de facto mental health, providers. And it's,
You don't choose to be homeless,
yeah, well, and they're not, and police aren't equipped to
Right,
deal with
just get somebody, just bake
mental
right,
health
throw 'em in the mental,
issues.
yeah.
It's that's also a topic I think that I hope we'll start to see more light and,
Yeah.
and get more airtime, because I think it's becoming a little less stigmatized, as we move forward. Just like addiction is not a moral failing. Addiction is clearly, a disease. Mental health issues are actual real things. Even though we can't see, somebody has cancer or diabetes,
Exactly.
we treat them. Oh my gosh, mental health. We kind of like, ugh, this guy's acting like a lunatic.
Right.
But I think there is a changing in the tide. I think there's some stuff changing. What is your most heinous crime that you've represented?
Ugh, I hate saying this.
Yeah, because it's the most.
The most heinous.
I think
tell me.
child molestation
Yeah,
is the
Or
worst.
child porn.
Kind
Well, I guess
of case.
And you
Child
guys
molestation,
have
yeah.
you guys
Child
have represented people.
Look, especially, Peter and I, having been at the public defender's office,
Yeah.
you don't get to choose your cases. As a private attorney, I now have the luxury
Yeah.
of being able to turn down cases.
Okay.
But when you're a public defender, you are there and you're
Are
fighting
you turning
the good
down a
fight.
child porn case or a child sex case?
I have represented child
Okay.
porn cases as a private attorney.
Goes back to the gray area, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the situation. I think everybody is entitled to a defense. That's the thing. You may not necessarily
I agree.
like
Yeah.
the kind of case that your client was charged with, but
I always, when people say that everybody's entitled, I go back to there was a scene in a miniseries I saw years ago about John Adams, and these British soldiers, this is early in the colonies, had I guess hurt some people, maybe even killed some people, and they wanted to just string these guys up, and John Adams was like, "Hold on, these guys deserve a fair trial."
It's what makes us different. It's what
Right.
makes our system different. You're innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
A jury of your peers can make that decision.
Right.
You know what I mean? People make mistakes.
I mean, I think it all happened. These guys ended up getting the firing
That was
squad
the
anyway.
Right,
but
right.
yeah, it was fabulous.
At
'cause
least
I
they
was-
did a
that-
process for him.
But they did the
Yeah,
process,
yeah.
and the guy actually stepped up, and I think he took a lot of heat for defending them.
he did.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys must take some heat for defending
No.
child pornographers.
Well, I mean, you get
Yeah.
it with, I don't know about friends and family. How do you do what you do? How do you sleep at night?
Yeah.
And I don't think people always understand the oath we take and the fact that the Constitution states that you are entitled to a defense, and that you're entitled to the best defense. And our job a lot of the times is to provide that representation. I hate to use the word freedom fighters or, we represent the Constitution, but we do.
And would we want to live in a society where, there were no checks and balances, where the police could do whatever they wanted and the government could just say you're guilty? Do we want to live in a society like
This
that?
it is the best system.
Yeah, I repeat that on our program
not
from time to
perfect,
time.
but
It
it's
not
is
perfect,
yes.
but it's the
It's the best,
Yeah, I just saw a fabulous film called The Insult, and their whole judicial system is based on first it's one judge, and the guy sits there and hears it. He makes the decision, then it goes to a panel of 3 judges. There's no jury of your peers. It's these 3 people that sit up there, and if they had a crappy day or if they have
Yep.
a slant,
And guess what? Everybody tells them they didn't do it. Same
No,
guy
we-
hearing the same thing
I'm-
over and over.
I remember
Right.
watching I think it's Oscar Pistorius, the Olympic athlete who had the prosthetics and he
Yeah.
had killed his girlfriend. I remember watching the trial and being like, why is everyone talking to the judge? This is very weird to me. And literally, it's one person making a decision.
Exactly.
And it goes back to also, we have rules of evidence. There's reason why certain things don't come into trial, right? There's certain reason why, if you say something out of court, there's hearsay. There's all these reasons for it. And the judge shouldn't know those things and then also make those decisions. Like one of my biggest issues is juvenile court, where you'll have a trial in juvenile court and the rules of evidence apply and you're arguing to the judge. In juvenile court, there isn't a jury. The jury's the judge. And I'm making my argument and I'm doing this trial, but I know that the judge has the file right there. So when I go and I try a case in front of a jury, the jury's not seeing the police report. That officer needs to come in and testify as to what happened, stick to his story, and actually recount the details, all while the judge is reading the police form.
Right.
And it's to me, it's backwards. There should be maybe a pretrial judge and then a trial
Right.
judge in juvenile.
Right, because it seems to me that the judge in the U.S. Court system is almost like a kind of like a manager.
Referee.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a ref. Like,
This comes
okay,
in.
it's not your turn.
Yeah.
You go ahead. Okay. And not really the arbiter of the final decision.
Right.
I mean, I guess there are instances where the judge is, where there's not. I mean, do we have trials? Have you done trials where there's not a jury?
You
or
can
it's
go
just-
bench.
Bench
but I would
trial,
never-
but I've never
That's
done
a
one.
bench trial. No?
Right, it just goes to show you none of us would ever choose bench
You
if you could, just
Yeah.
because you want a jury. You don't want it to just go to one person.
Right.
The best way to lose your job as a public defender, one of the few ways you can, is go bench.
No
Yeah,
kidding.
go bench. It's
Really?
how long you last. Yeah.
So a bench trial is just you, them, and the judge.
Yeah.
And so nobody does that. I'm just curious if you think that might be a better system than all these plea bargains that are getting plead out, because it seems like a lot of these kids are getting these pleas with paroles attached to them, and it's like a setup for failure because it seems so easy for them to violate their parole.
Probation.
I mean,
Parole is abolished
yeah, I mean probation.
here.
Yes,
Yeah,
probation. Yes,
well,
we don't have parole in this.
No.
state.
Probation's a trap.
Probation. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you guys have all had those conversations with your client where it's like you can take 4 years straight or do a year and 10 years on probation, and it's hard to tell someone like do the extra 3.
Right.
Right.
But like we
Don't
know the
get out
pitfalls
right now.
because now you're now you might be facing on the probation violation, a full it's
Because
just,
if you violate the probation,
and there's so many
It's
ways
worse.
to violate.
It's worse.
And
It's
then a
worse,
pro-
and they kind of have you. It's easier to convict you once
the
you
standard's
violate
different.
probation.
When you go to a probation violation hearing, it's not reasonable doubt in front of a jury.
No.
It's a different standard now.
And there, it's in front of the judge.
But who's
that's
gonna
a bench trial.
right? But
Yeah.
who's gonna say? No, you know what? I think I'm gonna do 4 years in
Yeah,
prison
I'll do the
instead.
extra-
I think I'll do
Yeah.
that instead.
Yeah, of
no
course.
one's gonna say that. So it's made, and they know that they offer these things knowing what the person is going to pick. I would rather all the time. Would rather them either give me a terrible plea, which forces my client either to go to trial, not have to choose between picking something that is terrible, or just give me the plea that doesn't include something he'll fail at later.
Which is why the bond system is also broken, because how many times have you had a client in custody where, they're offering an insane probation term, but it gets them out of jail today.
Yeah.
And they just got to take it to get out. And that person's going to be stuck in the system for the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, maybe never get out and back up in jail. And it was all because they had to get out right then and there, when you might have that same client who comes from a different background, who has the money to maybe bond out. And now they can make more, I don't want to say rational decisions, but more thoughtful, less pressure-filled
Not as
situations.
desperate to get out of
there you go.
jail.
Right. Yeah, and I've heard these stories firsthand from guys that have been arrested, been in there for 6 weeks, and they're like, "Look, if you just sign here,
Get
you
out.
can go home today.
Yeah. Pay
Go
court
see your kids.
pay court costs and you get
Yeah,
out.
you can go home and
Yeah.
you sleep in your own bed tonight.
Yeah.
Come on, why don't you just sign this?" And they do, and then 6 weeks later, they pee dirty, which means they had drugs in their system, and they get arrested, and then they're back in.
Or they're on a GPS and the monitor reads it wrong and it says that they're out when they're not supposed to be, and now
Right.
they're stuck in custody for 5 months while we're trying to prove that they actually were. I mean, there's all these pitfalls. There's so many pitfalls, which is why it's a trap.
So how do we change that?
I don't know if you can, because people are going to always make that decision while they're in custody.
The only way is for prosecutors not to offer those kind of plea deals. And of course, our job is always going to be to try to get the person out of jail as soon as possible.
course.
So,
Right.
it's like a catch-22.
I'll give you one thing that also could help with that, is that while on probation or even when you're in jail, our system, when we created this criminal justice system, it was supposed to be this balance of punishment and rehabilitation.
Correct.
It's 50-50. And I'm assuming due to funding, it is and privatized of jails, it's now 95-5. So if we're not rehabilitating
95 punishment, 5% rehabilitation.
and people are making money off the punishment, right? Whether it be court options or private jails or probation, there's a whole system that thrives financially on people being on probation, staying in this system. So if we get back to more of a rehabilitative state, people are making better choices. They're staying out of this. It's more forgiving now too, right? Because people are going to mess up, especially if you're an addict or you have mental health issues. That might be one of the better ways to do it. It's just I don't know how realistic it is.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a better way to do it. There are countries that have tried this, this approach of love and inclusion and connection and
Educate.
community and fellowship and being a part of and having some ownership in, because that's just human nature. Listen, we've all read the studies and seen the documentaries. The kid that doesn't have the mom or the dad at home, falls in with the gang. Why? Because there's some acceptance, there's some love, there's some connection, there's some security, because that's what people want.
Well, we talked about that, off air. That's
Yeah.
the rational choice, right? I was watching a documentary, The House We Live In, or The House I Live In, and they talk about the 14-year-old boy whose father's not there, mom's working 2 jobs, right? So she's never there, he's hungry, and everyone's telling him, stay in school, be a doctor, be a lawyer. This person has never met a doctor or a lawyer. He doesn't know what that means.
Right.
So we're telling him, chase this dream that you don't know, this mythical, hope. And then at the same time, the people that are successful in some of these neighborhoods, are drug dealers and pimps, and they're offering jobs, and they're saying, you can make this money, you can live a decent life, you can feed yourself. The rational choice is not to stay hungry and chase this dream that you don't know anyone that's accomplished it. The rational choice is to go make the easy money and provide for your brothers and sisters maybe and feed yourself and
Survive.
And we're asking them to make the irrational choice, and then we get mad when they make the rational choice.
Exactly. Have you guys ever had a client that the prosecution has asked you to get them to flip against somebody else?
Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me how that works.
It happens a lot more often in federal court
Yeah.
than in state court, I believe. But
Yeah.
especially in drug cases, fraud cases, they all defendants, you have an indictment with 4 or 5 individuals. They're all charged with the same charge.
Yeah.
And then the prosecution will say, hey, who's going to work with me? And a lot of defendants will say, I'll serve as a witness. And they say everything that happened. And if one of those individuals in the indictment decides to go to trial, all, quote unquote, friends they'll all line up and testify against them. And they will get potentially half the time.
Is that usually what happens?
Yeah, they were going to get had they just pled guilty. Obviously, it's a half, third. That's a whole other ballgame of hearings. But
Happens frequently.
Yeah.
Do you guys encourage that, or do you discourage it? How?
Me personally, it's on a case-by-case basis.
I mean, now in federal court, most people are cooperating. I don't know what the statistics are,
Right.
but the majority, I would say, it could be 80% of people
Cooperate.
cooperating.
Flip.
Yeah.
Flipping. They're
Snitch.
cooperating.
Snitch.
They're snitches against
Yeah.
other people. That's why trials, you don't see them as often now, because what will happen, and it's so awful, but what will happen is the people in the jail, they will go ahead, and if they know someone's going to go to trial, they will steal paperwork belonging to that person. They will try to get close to them. They will do whatever they can to learn about that case. And then they will try to get on as a witness against that person so that they can get credit for themselves. So you
Reduce their own sentence.
will to
Yeah.
reduce their own sentence.
Wow.
It's awful, but now, the sentences are so long and they're so harsh that the only way to try to lessen the time in jail is, to cooperate with the government. Give them snitch and give them some other people, and then, you know what? You're going to lower your sentence.
And the problem with that is because the sentences are so harsh and people are looking for any ways to lower their sentences, you get a lot of false cooperations. A lot of people making up stories, a lot of people,
Embellishing.
doing whatever they can to lower theirs. It's a dog-eat-dog world there. And
Person goes to trial.
Yeah.
Oh, my cellmate was going to trial. He confessed to me when we were, watching
Really?
TV.
You can do that?
Yeah, I had a client who
That actually holds up in a court?
cellmate
well, you
wrote a letter.
cross-examine.
Yeah,
Jurors are buying it.
yeah.
Wow.
Jurors are buying it.
Cellmate writes
you
a
know?
letter to the prosecutor saying he confessed to me
Yeah.
while we were watching TV. on
And you can
Tuesday.
make the argument all day long to a jury that, look, this whole case is based upon 5 witnesses who came in here and said that my guy did that, but they all have something to gain from that. You have to ask yourself that, that they're getting a benefit. You can't trust what they say, but people are still being found guilty.
And does it work? And so people are still being found guilty.
Yeah.
So that's because, the
Because
old eyewitness.
the more you hear, if
Yeah.
there's 5 people, there's got to be some
There's
truth
smoke,
to it.
there's fire. Even if
Right.
if you have one, You could poke holes in the credibility of that witness.
Right.
If you got 5 and you're poking the credibility in 5,
Right.
the jury might say, look,
Yeah.
that person might not be credible, but I'm hearing the same story from
One
5
guy
people.
may lie, 2
Yeah.
guys, but
No, no,
you know,
for
when
sure.
you have 5,
Yeah.
it's a little tough.
Wow. That's not a very good deal.
Nope.
Yeah. You guys are kind of up against it when you get somebody that flips, huh?
That's why it's so rare that people
Yeah.
go to trial anymore. That's another big reason of why trials are a kind of a dying art form. It's sad, but
So it's not just because there's a big backlog. It's because the pleas and the people flipping to get reduced sentences and just.
I think it
work
all
right through it.
plays. I think it's the totality of the circum. You know, it's everything, and each case it gets affected differently. Whether it's a midman or people flip, every case is different. But when you have so many things working against you, it's going to cause numbers to come down. It's going to cause people not to want to take that risk and go to trial, even if they feel like they're innocent. You know.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so an update. This is old information, but according to our researchers, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Vermont, and Texas are the other states.
I don't know if Texas
Texas,
still does.
there you go. That's a
Yeah, Texas and Florida have very similar.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure why South
I didn't know
Dakota
that.
does it and North Dakota doesn't. I'm actually not even sure why there is a South and a North Dakota. I can see a South Florida and a North Florida.
There
Right.
should be.
There should be.
We are 2 states within one.
We
Trust me.
really
There's
are.
doubt.
above Orlando and there's south of
My
Orlando.
father, may he rest in peace, used to always say, I don't know why they don't have a Florida North and a Florida South. Because it's 2 different states. I mean, it really is. It's
When I go to Tallahassee a lot, it's South Georgia. That's not
yeah,
Florida.
there's some good old folk up there.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's one way to put it.
That's the South. All right. So before we wrap it up, one of the things that we like to do, because most of us that produce this show are involved in music, we like to get a little round table of who's playing on your playlist, who's playing in your car, what music are you listening to this week? Who you guys listening to?
It depends on what's going on. If I'm trying, I mean, I'm all over the place. I'll listen to anything from the XX to Florence and the Machine to Kodak Black and Drake. I'm all over the place.
all over the
I went
place.
to Nashville and fell in love with country for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah,
All right.
but if we're gonna go one, we'll go Drake. How about that?
Okay. God's plan.
A little Metallica.
Metallica,
Yeah,
nice.
a little bit,
Rock
yeah.
and roll.
Going back to middle school.
Nice. Very cool.
so I have 2 younger girls, and I listen to Radio Disney a
Shout out
lot.
Frozen.
Who's popping on Radio Disney right now?
You know, Dua Lipa. There's a lot of people there. So I listen to Camila Cabello. You know, all the Radio Disney people.
right.
But before a trial, I listen to Rocky, Eye of the Tiger,
Okay.
Oh, there you
or
go.
Eminem, and I can't.
8 Mile?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Before pump myself up.
You don't even realize you did it. You just stole my voir dire. I do my whole voir dire, and they say, "Where do you get your news from?" We did this whole thing.
Where'd you get your music
Where
from?
we listen to our music.
Nice. Well, thank you guys so much for coming down and participating. You know, we're here to hopefully make a change. We appreciate what you guys are doing out there, helping to defend the innocent until they are proven guilty. For the Felony Miami crew, I'm your host, Joe Stone. Don't forget to check us out online, felonymiami.com. Check us out on Spotify, iTunes, RSS feeds all over the world. Give us a review, give us a like. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Well, it's early on and morning. Then when I ride, Lord and Mama, well, it's early